Hello,
Je m'appelle Holly Russell et je suis
I'm Holly
curatrice du
Roussel.
secteur
I
Curiosa
am
pour cette année,
the
le
curator of the
25e
Curiosa
anniversaire de
section
Paris
this
Photo.
year on this 25th anniversary of
En
Paris
temps autre, hors
Photo.
de Paris Photo, je suis une
Outside
commissaire
of Paris Photo, I
d'exposition au
am an
Centre d'art
exhibition
contemporain de
curator at
UCCA à Pékin et à
UCCA
Shanghai.
in
Et
Peking,
j'ai le
Peking,
plaisir
Beijing,
aujourd'hui
and Shanghai.
de modérer deux talks,
I'm
de
here
conversations.
to
Le
moderate
premier,
two
on va
talks.
le
The
faire en
first
français
one
et le deuxième en
will be in
anglais.
French and the second in English.
Et l'idée de ces talks, c'était de
The idea of these talks is to pay more attention to the artists in Curiosa section, so we can go deeper into their work, because they're presenting, in most cases, new series of photographic work. And I also wanted to take the opportunity to see how their photographic practices were situated in contemporary creation today, and ask them questions, difficult and easy ones, just to give a little bit of explanation, a bit of a context on the Curiosa section. It's the center, the area at the beginning of the building. It's the work of 17 emerging artists from 12 countries. They are emerging on the market. This year, we are highlighting the breadth of interdisciplinary trends in photography and reflect some of the exciting diversity of photographic work around the world. This year's selection of work is built around traditional genres, notably portraiture and landscape, but also allows us to discover how a new generation of artists is adopting heterodox approaches to image making. In Curiosa, I wanted to highlight a young generation of image makers who share a hybrid character and show the potential for fusion between physical and digital domains. Today we'll discuss two artists who present their work, Mathieu Gafsou from Switzerland and Jean-Vincent Simonet from France. With these works, they raise questions about the photographic discipline and culture in general, or to evoke personal, environmental, or metaphysical questions. So we look forward to learning a bit more about their worlds. When we did a Zoom preparation for this conference, there's a big difference in age. They both notice a difference in age between the two of them. I think that's very interesting to note as well. There's about 10 years difference. It's representative as well from this period of experimentations that we have. I was very touched by these two bodies of work, because there's a plastic, in quotes, reflection, or a material reflection that goes beyond a formal or reflexive experimentation on the medium and plays with the chance to reinforce their conceptual and artistic statements. So I'll introduce the two artists, invite them each in turn to briefly show their background and artistic universe, and then we'll have a discussion about new projects and their conception. We can have some questions and a conversation. So Jean-Vincent Simonet studied at l'École in Switzerland. He has a practice that is about testing the limits of digital printing with special inks, resins, portraits, to create washed works which are very unique. Before, he had done experiments in landscapes, in images inspired by fashion or architecture, but in his most recent work, Heirloom, he has a very different side in both the subject and approach. So it's really a personal subject. I was very touched by the work on the multi-generational heritage of his family in Lyon. So he's based between Paris and Zurich and works in fashion, so competition photography, editorial, and personal explorations. He's works his various works in the Photo Museum in those, a museum in Zurich, Swiss Design Awards, and in Amsterdam. His works can be seen just behind us. He's published at RVB in Bloom in 2018, and a self-published work after that. As for Matthew, he is based in Switzerland, lives in Lausanne. He has a master's in philosophy, literature and cinema from the University of Lausanne, and he has attended the School of Applied Arts in Vevey. Since 2006, he's participated in numerous exhibitions and has published 7 books. He's working for he received the HSBC Foundation Prize for Photography, and he was the Musée de l'Élysée in Lausanne hosted his projects Only God Could Judge Me in 2014. And 2022, he has a project Vivant presented in extenso at the Museum of Pulich alongside a first retrospective, and he's represented by the Gallery C here at Paris Photo. I'll let them talk about their careers themselves. Perhaps Jean-Vincent, would you like to show us a little bit of your universe, your images? Thank you, Holly, for this introduction. I prepared a little PDF to explain some of the previous work that has led up to the project that's presented at Furiosa this year. This is the first project that I did as my end of studies graduation project in 2014, Mal d'Aurore. So it illustrates the Chant de Mal d'Aurore. It's in a book, the premises of surrealism. The idea of my graduation project was to really use the text to create imagery, and that's kind of where my research started with photography, especially changing and using different photographic techniques, as you can see on the left, infography, infrarouge, macro photography on the right, and then all of this body of images were presented at different exhibitions, and you can see, I think that's at the Atelier Néerlandais in the Fond de Talent show in 2016. You can always see a lot of varieties of different techniques that at the time were digital, using software to transform the pixels in infrared, and digital collage. And I made wallpaper to fill the spaces and really saturate the space with the image. And kind of a lot of blur as well. And I was really wanted to use photography like a material to build with rather than a result, like an outcome or an output. So he was directing images here in Bloom with the following project in 2018, and I accentuated that work again. So several journeys, trips I did to Tokyo and around Japan. It's kind of a nocturnal project, quite personal, as I would wander through the city. There are several bodies of work, of images that came in part of that series. There's an architectural series you can see on this image, and these architects, to put them in the book, I started by printing them on plastic, different kind of plastics, to give them a bit of an aquatic side, to make them look less fixed, less rigid, and get them go into this kind of flow of images in the book. Here are several examples here. So kind of, for me, it was a bit of a turning point. Something kind of clicked. And I started transforming the images physically, not just with software. That came from a desire to really get my hands, in the material in a way. and come out of the kind of traditional production methods and circuits. For in Bloom, I was really able to begin transforming these images with my hands. I printed them on poorly adapted materials on which the ink wouldn't dry. So when it would come out of the printer, it was still damp, and I could use water, different chemicals in my hands, or various other effects like cold or heat, and I was able to make this photographic surface into a living thing that I could mold and shape. And of course, there were errors too. I mean, it's trial and error. It's a technique that nobody's using. It was something experimental. So I made lots of mistakes and kind of advancing blindly, trying to discover all the different options. Here we have a video. You can see me using these different plastics in the print shop where I work. So then they go into the printer. This is accelerated, of course. It comes out, and it's very sensitive. And there's already a deformation of the image when it comes out, which I can change the inking to already create that, and the texture is changed as well, depending on those values that I can set. So this is a really delicate moment where it's very sensitive. I can treat it in various different ways here with heat. And then I might pour different liquids over it. So this is water here, and gets rid of the extra ink or the excess ink. You can see the darkest areas is where I have the most possibility to work. So if I take the ink away, it becomes more complex. But the richer the surfaces are, the more interesting outcomes I can have. So there are different ways here of treating the image. And then for the next part of my presentation, from working this way, it's my family's printing shop. I really grew up there, which we've had for 4 generations, from my great-great-grandfather down. And as I've been working there so long, I started getting really passionate about the place itself, and I would go in the evenings and weekends when the staff was away. So you can really see where I'm working here. And I started taking over the space, making it my own, and really playing with the machines in different ways. The next project is called Waterworks, which is even more advanced in terms of experimentation. The unique books, which can be shown right now on LVB Books. There's a few images left. It's 30, a limited edition of 30 prints. So all of that is in 2021, printing these books page by page. I really pushed the idea of using those machines in my own way. I did a lot of cutting out. These are a few double pages from Waterworks. All of that. Let me take a pause. I just wanted to say, when Jean-Vincent showed this new series that we're going to presenting, and it's presented at Paris Photo, almost in the industry, we knew about his previous works, but we had no idea his family was in printing. It was really interesting when he brought this new series out that there was a whole extra level of meaning, very personal meaning behind this experimentation with the printing machines. For us, Heirloom, it showed a kind of different stage in your experimentation. Kind of where things have come full circle. We see where your origins, where it all came from as an artist. For sure. Something I didn't say is that I work in editorial and commission photography, and there's still a little bit, I've always kind of split my time between those two areas, which feed into each other. And I was fortunate enough to have an exhibition at the Galerie Sentiment in Zurich, which is a contemporary art gallery less focused on photography. And they really pushed me to do something personal and maybe take more risks in terms of the images, to have something maybe was less attractive, less seductive, but more personal, and something through which I had something strong, a strong message to convey. So the gallery was the people in the gallery working there. Do they know the projects? The gallery followed all of the previous works I did, and they offered me a solo show. And given that the context was different than a photo festival, I wanted to push things further, and I was fortunate that the gallery owners are also friends, and so I was able to talk to them. And in Waterworks, I was already started. You can see some of the images from the printing that have start to show through, but it wasn't a full, complete project yet.
So I started documenting the printing shop in the evenings on the weekend, and so during the day, this print shop is busy. There are different sculptures, let's call them, in the different paper trays. This was the first exhibit that I did of this project in the Saint-Simon Gallery in Zurich. And this was an opportunity for me to present smaller formats because the plastic materials that I use only existed in this size. So those constraints kind of obliged me to make a more intimate type work. And how should I put this? That allowed me to have a different type of hanging, maybe more sober, a little less aggressive maybe, and kind of transform the way I present my work with respect to previous exhibits. So I wanted to document certain areas of the shop, so with no staging or no effects. So kind of like, la nature morte, kind of like still lifes of the print shop, and always using these materials that are not really adapted to printing, and then intervening, kind of, it's almost like finger painting at this point. But this was more photographic, in fact, in the end, and more controlled, because it's kind of a gray area between photography and painting. It's kind of a strange area in which to work. Of course, I still have these unnatural colors that I work with. It looks almost like an X-ray, and so it's showing different layers of the image, and it's almost troubling, and could almost be a negative, I think, in certain spots. So I guess I kind of wanted to shake up the understanding, the canons of photography. So the difference between negatives, experiments in the darkroom, cyanotypes, and all those other things. So these experiments with, this ink play, I'll call it, I kind of wanted to shake things up, and I find that area of experimental photography interesting and very adapted. So also, I wanted to focus on the circulation of images. For example, my parents produce labels, produce commercial images that don't necessarily have an artistic aspect to them. So I guess it could be called kind of the poorer, raw images, but I wanted to present these as almost paintings. So that changes our perception of these items and these objects. I'm gonna speed up a little bit. Then here, for example, this is just something very characteristic of label printing. These are labels for wheels of cheese. So you see the form. I thought it was interesting to document. So I print them several times in a row to decide how I like how the image is deformed, and then I choose which one I like, and then I play again with that image before I present it. Before I choose my final version. Thank you so much. So we're going to segue from painting and contemporary art to Mathieu Gafsou. So I have to say the two artists that I've welcomed today are two people that I noticed through their work, and they're both at turning points in their careers, I believe. So you, Jean-Vincent, you were saying that you're kind of at a turning point, you're changing what you're doing in your career, but Mathieu, the same is true for you. You're focusing more on series, kind of a free form of documentary and mix different formal modalities so that the photographs function as a network, almost as a series. And that, he hopes, will allow us to attach multiple meanings to these images and challenge the viewer to confront an impending environmental catastrophe. So in this series, in order to create this feeling, he intervenes on landscapes in two ways. I think we're going to focus more on one than the other. So first of all, in performative acts on these landscapes, and secondly, with the printing, where he paints with oil and other substances to bring about maybe have us doubt the future of our water and air resources in a poetic fashion. I think it's very interesting to see someone who worked in portraits and documentary photos, architecture and landscape photos. And this is why I noticed immediately this transition, that you decided to try something, test something, and do something completely different. And I appreciate that as an artist. I find that very exciting. So please tell us about your new work. Is that better? Hello. So I am going to show you a little bit of my older work, just briefly. From where I come from documentary work, and my first project that you can see here is my father's country of origin. And I've always been I always took a step back from my documentary work. So when I left school at 2018, I also had personal issues that kind of had me stay behind the scenes through my documentary work, allowed me to really stay behind the camera. I did win a prize in 2019. So I focused on theatrical reality, I guess, with allegorical images that kind of summarize all that's in stake in my images. So this project allowed me to start out in photography, and I've been taking photos for 15 years now. And so my search for a formal language and the search, I suppose, for origins of that, here's a man-made sculpture. And it's basically work that I did for my studies. I suppose that it looks almost scholastic to me now. But little by little and very slowly, I started moving away from that. I worked on landscapes. I photographed the Alps in Switzerland, the Romanticism. How can this search for the sublime take us almost further away from the sublime? Because tourism is always involved in that. So when we are my subject was the mountains, the Alps, and I wanted to kind of use this formal discourse and sociological discourse when examining that. And I also wanted to kind of focus a little bit on Lausanne, because we see the mountains, but it's from our lakes that we really see the triviality of tourism. But I think that this photo summarizes pretty much my work for the project that I called Alp. Then I published a book. This is called Sacré, Sacred. It was a little bit more difficult. I wanted to talk to you later about my resistance to portraits and presenting human figures. I decided to, to focus on this subject in Switzerland, and I felt that I was leaving my initiation phase, I guess, and I'm really exploring existential issues. I saw this photo, for example, as an older woman with beautiful jewels. So I try between my projects to question the formal choices that I made on the previous project. So my documentary images kind of gave way to more allegorical images. The more I photographed, I'm going through a little bit quickly. So I worked in the drug trade in Lausanne. I took photos of addicts, and I wanted to show that sometimes we find beauty where we're not looking for it. In Switzerland, a lot of these people are made invisible. There's a specific area, and like I said, what we don't want to see, sometimes I wanted to make them visible. I wanted to allow them to exist. So we have a stereotypical idea of people who exist in that space. This project was dark for me, but I also I had an ambivalent approach to this, to drugs and to this entire milieu. But I wanted to find and allow a certain poetry to emerge from that world. So here's a bubble that's about to burst that represents the fragility and the rapidity, the speed at which that moment can be lost. So here's some more work. Usually I work with documentary images, but here those photos are the product of things that people would tell me, of people's stories. So this is a project called H+ for the Rencontre d'Art. So this was successful, quite successful, and this is a highly documentary project. So this obviously focuses on anxiety, because humans try to control everything all the time. So this is a project that focuses on helping people who have lost the use of their limbs to regain the use of those limbs. So this is a fascination of science and its desire to allow a rat to be able to walk again. So they're using electrodes on that are attached to the skull of the rat, and the rat does a little bit lost. So I used captions underneath each photo. And we end with the question of the limits of death. There's a little bit of magic. I became a photographer when, we grow out of our childhood and we lose that magic. I find that my fascination with sort of strange things and that magic allow me to add something of that to my work today. This is the allegory of the chimera. So again, focusing on our desire to control everything all the time. And my photographic practice allows me to question things, and I still am able to protect myself behind a very formally constructed and homogeneous projects. But so projects that focus on ecology force us to focus on the fact that we can't control everything, and that obliged me to change my approach. Over the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working on Vivant, which is now being presented at the Puyi Museum. I used substances here. So this project is more fragmented. So I used petrol, and I'm talking about a shock here between images, and the main characters in this series are my children and also my partner, and this is a manifestation of the future. I'm obliged to look toward the future, and I'm violently confronted with this question of the environment and our future. Here I colored this river, obviously with natural and non-polluting pigments, to illustrate pollution. Trying to be quick. I'll talk quickly about this image because these are flowers in a greenhouse. They're behind, they're underneath the tarp. So they're, at the same time, they're very seductive and beautiful, but they're also a symbol of us being cut off from our environment. There is a wall between us and these flowers. So it symbolizes things that are near to us, that can be physically near to us, but yet cut off from us in different ways. I have a question. There's one of your images that is exhibited with tourists that are climbing.
Et cette image-là, en fait, la première fois que je l'avais vue, il n'était pas encore.
So this is the first time I saw it. and it hadn't been. So it was from the beginning of this series. I'm quite curious. At what moment did you decide to move away from the documentary vein and go on these this kind of image you showed at the end of your presentation? So I was really more looking for an organic form for this series and their autonomy. And so for the question of ecology, it's I was trying to break through barriers, which are our personal barriers as well, and the kind of personal life reveals fragility, and that was really at the heart of it. And it became organic all by itself. I did lots of different experiments with objects which I painted as well. And then this is images of landscapes which we've seen a lot, and even if they do work, it doesn't seem sufficient for me. It's hard for me to explain exactly, but it happened. There was a turn, and when it happened, I accepted to do something with less control and with a visual form. It was not really kitsch, but more in that direction. And it's certainly something I couldn't control 100%. I found that very interesting for both of you. The role of experimentation and this place you leave for things to happen in your printing. Something I love a lot with this petrol series. There was a concept about in the environment to begin with, and then using petrol, it really yellowed the skies, the images, which I think that's with water. I don't know if it began that way from the outset, but it's very poetic. These part of the images which are yellowed. I think it's interesting because there is a seduction there. And I thought seduction was always a good way to create a connection. And it's hard for me to step away from that. And the ambivalence of an image that evokes pollution is interesting. We're all ambivalent when it comes to ecology. As individuals, we can't have a kind of 100% ecological behavior. And there's a question of systems here, of course. So I like that ambivalence and maybe even contradiction. I have a question as well. Jean-Vincent, as well. Here, as we're here in Paris Photo, asking in terms of preservation, how do you work with your prints? So you have yours are in books and yours are unique. Maybe we could talk about those differences. It's very interesting. Yeah. So I chose to not show the petrol prints. They stayed in my workshop. They smell bad, and they're in a plastic container in my workshop. I still do feel, like a photographer, and I like the idea that we can refuse to publish things in a certain way and not show the unique work, the original. Creates a certain frustration. It may not be the best choice in terms of the market, but that's too bad. That's how I feel about it. Excellent question. I think exactly the opposite of my colleague here, so that's super fun. I think I've been experimenting with this material, with these plastics, and all of these things, and having pushed those experiments so far means that I couldn't get the same colors, the same contrast, or the same feeling with a scan or a reproduction of the original. And therefore, trying to position myself more, a little back, more back than in photography generally. So there's kind of pieces here which with works that are somewhere between photography and painting. So for me, it just seems impossible for me not to present original works, the originals, and I completely abandoned the reproduction side, which I also find is interesting to do, but didn't make any sense with the series that I was making. With things that looked quite, which had a certain gesture behind them, and there's a certain movement, and that wouldn't come through in a print, a scan. And then we have this idea of preservation, how to protect the works. So these plastics are made for printing, which are they can't be torn, they are weather resistant and waterproof. So some of them have been in the sun for years and they haven't changed. Even with printing with the inks, I don't know in 30 years what could happen, either though. So with the printing in this series, they were compressed under protective glass and then sealed with lead. So there's no oxygen or atmospheric pollution touching them, which often creates a lot of degradation of the works. I think this should be okay. It's funny, curious with our approaches. Even if we're both here talking about experiments we've been doing, the thematic dimension is a lot. How can I say it? So, we have a certain coherency in our own way. Me going more to publishing and you more to exhibiting.
En tout cas, j'espère que vous avez eu un petit
Yes, I hope that you will all be able to go and check out these universes of these two artists and how they can have a different conception of their experiments in the terrain. Both of them, there's a real cohesion, strong cohesion between the ideas behind the project and the actual results. I'm really happy that we're able to have time and discovering their universe. I hope that you see that change. That's really not formal approach. To conclude, and then we can open the floor to the audience if you have questions. Both tried we talked about the construction of images and the intervention that comes from exterior elements that comes and modifies the works, but for both of you, these elements fill that mission of showing something more personal, more global at the same time, beyond the self. We talked about this physicality of photographic practice and technique, but that's not really what I want to show you, but more how I want to show how you can do that to really go beyond that and make something very rich. Thank you, Jean-Vincent and Mathieu. If you have any questions in the audience, or if you have questions. And otherwise?
Et puis, s'il n'y a pas de questions, vous êtes invités si vous voulez.
We'd like to invite you to. You could also, of course, come up and speak to us one-to-one. We'll be here. Thank you all for your attention and welcome today. And thanks to both of the artists.